Good morning, everybody. Welcome to this webinar by Core Recruitment on mental health. And thank you very much for joining us. Core has been hosting a series of webinars through the pandemic, and we've been doing this since March, and we will be doing them in the current format up until the end of the year. From January, we're going to be moving to doing 2 webinars a week on specific subject areas, plus one of our core circle events every week as well. We're also going to be looking at some featured companies for exceptional businesses who've got some good stories to tell. We did one of these earlier on this year with Extreme, the sports business, and over the next couple of weeks we have company features coming up with Dorchester Collection and Brewdog as well, who are going to be telling us about some of the innovation and some of the approach that they've been taking through this period. Our core circle events are designed just for kind of senior executives and business leaders, and we get about 50 people logging in per week for this kind of like open forum networking kind of events. So if you'd like to get involved with those, then please message me on christian@corerecruitment.com. We've got one session coming up on Friday this week, which is looking at customer engagement. That will be quite a good one. If you've got any suggestions or areas that you'd like us to cover as part of this series, or indeed people or companies that you would like us to feature, then please also get in touch and let us know. We are going to be sending over a listing later on today with all of our previous webinars and all the ones we've got coming up for the rest of the year, including the 16th of December, where we're doing a Christmas jumper special. I don't think anyone's going to want to miss that one. At Core, the vaccines brought lots more positivity into the marketplace, and we've been getting more roles coming in at senior level, and lots of people giving us job roles which are starting next year with March start dates, which is a bit of an anomaly. But lots of companies who we are getting requesting salary checkers as well. So it looks like people are trying to make sure they're match fit for 2021, which is hopefully going to put us all in a slightly better place. Now back to today in our mental health webinar. I'm going to start by working my way around the group and kind of like asking the guys kind of like, you know, a different topic area each. And then we're going to get contributions from the rest of the panel on that topic area as we move on. I would ask the speakers that when they first speak on the webinar, if you could give your name, your company, and then just a little bit kind of like about how COVID has affected your business, that would be fantastic. And then we can get through as much information on the mental health side of things as possible. It would be great to get some interaction, obviously, from the audience on this session as well. So there is a Q&A at the bottom of your screen and the comments box on the left-hand side of your screen. So if you've got anything that you would like to type in, comment, question, anything like that, then it'd be really good to hear from you. And then when we've got about 10 minutes to go, then we'll work around the group for a little wrap up, and our panel are going to give us kind of a top tip each for maintaining good mental health. And then we should look to finish up around about 12:15. Great, so I'm going to come to Simon first with the question of why the pandemic has raised so many issues within businesses when it comes to mental health. Simon.
Hey, thanks, Christian. So I'm Simon. I'm the People and Culture Director for a company called TeamSport. We operate 35 go-kart tracks across the UK. We employ about 900 crew members, and we have in a normal year about a million customers. And I think, as with many businesses, you know, we've been closed recently, but when we reopened post lockdown, and unlike many leisure businesses, we were really pleased with how we bounced back, and customer confidence in the product has been really good. So we've weathered the storm pretty well so far. In terms of your question, Christian, so why has the pandemic raised these issues in terms of mental health issues in so many businesses? I think the importance of, you know, everyone looking after their mental health, it's not a new topic. I think awareness, though, is certainly, you know, it's been growing over the last few years, and the recent pandemic has raised the profile, I think, for a number of reasons. I think, you know, obviously stress levels, people are concerned about their jobs, new ways of working, new ways of having to live, financial security, health concerns. I think time is another impact. You know, I think people have had more time to consider this topic generally and the impact it has on them. I think alcohol. I think, you know, the research has certainly shown that, you know, more is being consumed during lockdown, and we know the negative effect that can have on mental health. Limited exercise opportunity, particularly through the first lockdown, and you know, maybe a bit more of a sedentary sort of lifestyle for many. And I think the other point is, for many businesses, I think not being able to speak face to face and have that, you know, that personal contact with team members, and only interact kind of remotely with many. has impacted that kind of human element of us being able to really care for our teams easily and regularly check in. And I think sort of finally, above all, I think it's meant that businesses have needed to be, all these points have needed to be far more aware of the opportunity and the issues associated with mental health. And I think most businesses are desperately keen that they ensure that when they do, if they're not trading currently, when they do return to trading, they've got a team that's got a positive mindset, they're engaged, that they've looked after their wellness in the best possible way, in the best possible way that they can. So I think hopefully that is a start to a bit of an answer.
Excellent, that's fantastic. Any commentary from anyone else at this point? Quite a bunch. Okay, fine, fantastic. Oh, Maria.
Hiya. Yeah, I think, sorry, I'll introduce myself. So I'm Maria Speight, Head of HR at Fusion Lifestyle. We're a leisure management company. I'll speak a bit more about that later, but something that I've noticed is how there seems to be a bit of two camps between staff who've been on furlough and staff that have remained working. And I think they are both dealing with quite different mental health challenges. And it's been really interesting to see that and to try and deal with it, where you get staff on furlough feeling very much disconnected from the company, from their work, from something that they were busy doing every day, day in, day out. And then you get staff who were retained, who have been working for the most part incredibly long hours and feeling like they're carrying staff that are on furlough. And I think those two kind of camps have brought with it quite different sets of challenges as well. So as a people person, it's thinking about how we needed to support both those camps of people during this pandemic, because I think that the challenges presented are quite different, and that's been interesting to deal with.
Excellent, Maria. Duncan, on to you.
Yeah, I think it's really obvious point, but it's really exacerbated the issues. I think mental health's always been there, but I think what COVID's really done is bring it to the fore. And yeah, there are, I think that point from Maria was really good between furlough and non-furlough. I think it's recognizing that there's a range of different issues people will have. There's not a one cap fits all. But COVID's really kind of surfaced a lot of those issues and hopefully enables us to kind of get some solutions in place.
Yep, absolutely. Great, guys. Now I'm going to move on to the next topic, which we're coming to, and this is for Maria. So mental health in the workspace, how best to support people, Maria?
Yeah, so just to introduce the company that I'm with a little bit more. We manage fitness and leisure sites across the UK, so we have about 70 sites, and something that's struck us is how the sort of, I'd say campaigning, maybe gentle campaigning of the importance of physical activity and leisure in this kind of sense of fitness and well-being, and the impact of that on mental health, and how with lockdown that's been taken away from a lot of people, so it's impacted their mental health as well. So from a company point of view, we've seen it not only in our offering, but then again also in our staff who haven't been able to access these facilities as well. But I think in supporting people through both this time and the mental health challenges it presents, and then in normal times, whatever we're going to call it, there's a great book called Misconnections by someone called Harley, where he talks about depression as an example, as looking at it almost as a form of grief, because people are missing connection to something and they're not quite sure what it is. And I feel like bringing people back to a mission, if you like, of what your company is doing, what your job is doing and contributing to, can really support and benefit mental health. And as I just touched on, people on furlough, or perhaps people kind of burned out, that connection has been lost in many ways. People feel disconnected from why they're in that job and what they're doing as a business. So I feel that's one of the biggest and strongest things a workplace can do, is help employees feel connected to the brand, to the mission, to what they're doing. And with what we do, I find that's quite straightforward. We all know the benefit of exercise on your mental health. And if we can translate that to our staff and in the workplace and get them connected to the products that we're offering, I think that goes quite a long way. And most businesses, if not all, hopefully will have a driver, will have something people can get behind. It's helping them connect to the bigger picture. And when that is lost, people feel disconnected from the workplace. They don't feel necessarily loyal to it, then you start thinking, why am I in this job? I just go into this job every day and I leave and I'm not very happy and the person sitting next to me is annoying me. What's the kind of point of it all? And that's a really crucial piece, is to help people feel connected to their work.
Absolutely. Amir, just as a quick question from my side of things, have you guys been looking, obviously a lot of the work that you do is in the communities, etc. Are there any new additional services or anything like that you guys will be offering as part of the pandemic? Or is it in response?
Yeah, we're probably a little bit behind the curve in that we haven't done a lot of online and remote classes and delivery, but obviously that's something that a lot of our competitors, and now we've branched into. It's more accessible. So for people who aren't able to leave home because they're self-isolating or because leisure centres and gyms are closed and they can't access their classes, it's building that online virtual community. I don't think it can replace going into a class or going into the gym and seeing people and being in that physical space, but it's creating a bit of that space in someone's home. Trying to add different layers to it. Can we make it competitive so people are more engaged? Can we promote how exercise makes you feel? So I think in some ways it's forced us to look at these innovative ways of what we do, and not just a leisure centre as in bricks and mortar, but what does fitness and health and well-being really mean to people, and how can we get it virtually and remotely out there?
Yeah, absolutely. Good sentiment. Thank you very much for that. Maria, anyone got anything to add to that part? Nope, all good. Thank you very much.
I had a real quick one, Krishnan. I thought Maria's comment on bringing it back to the mission is really important. We've got the mission and the values of the business. One of our values is one crew. So it's about everyone working together, teamwork, but also looking after each other. And I think particularly when mental health is concerned, it's not necessarily just a management responsibility. We kind of look at it as everyone having to look after each other. So we use that one crew value quite a bit in terms of our messaging. And Maria used the word campaigning, but when we're talking about it, we talk about one crew. Call your mates up, call your buddies up, check on them, see how they're doing. I think it's really quite important.
Absolutely. Dan, your mute was off there as well.
Yeah, sorry. Very much what Simon said. I think it's really important that you make it part of the culture of the business. It's what, and I don't mean to be derogatory to anyone, but what we've seen in the past is a lot of people look at it as a reactive approach. Everything is done reactively towards mental health. We've seen it, so what do we do about it? And Shane, who's on here today, I know the reason that he set up Jasperwellbeing was to be more proactive, to teach people to be more proactive and actually make it ingrained within the business. You start, I know my topic a little bit later, I'll touch on it, but you start from the top, and the people at the top, they teach it all the way through, and we teach people how to notice the signs and the symptoms before it becomes a problem. But also, I won't dwell too much because Shane will probably pick up on it, but there's a big part on resilience and teaching resilience to the individual, but also to their managers and their managers alike, to make sure that it does filter down and they're all keeping an eye on each other and all looking after each other, as Simon was touching on.
Yeah, absolutely. Great, Dan. Thank you for that. So next topic that we are going to be going on to with Claire is creating a supportive environment where it's okay to not be okay. Claire.
I'm Claire. I'm the Head of Employee Relations at Leon. Yeah, I think more recent years, people have been more forthcoming about their mental health, but it's very much about creating that environment where people feel safe to talk about it. At Leon, we are very much about the proactiveness. We have winter wellbeing days, we have summer wellbeing days, and those are all about taking time out, not for a business, but to talk about ourselves, which has been one of the wonderful things about Leon, really helps our teams. Obviously, the pandemic has brought brand new challenges for us. And we found that during this time, it really is about what we can do proactively in terms of communication. So we have been having weekly calls with all of our teams. We've had Q&A sessions with our CEO, John Vincent. And then on the individual scales, we've been having morning check-ins with my wonderful team. And it makes such a big difference because actually people don't always want to come and speak directly to you about what's going on, but having these everyday interactions really helps in identifying any mental health issues, makes people feel more open, more part of the team, and more welcoming to having those discussions. So some of the things that we've been doing more recently is we're looking into other ways in which we can open up the conversation. So obviously Mental Health Day was just the other week. We had a big post on our internal website, which opened up a lot of conversation. We have wellbeing emails that go out every week to our teams with solutions and, well, not solutions, suggestions, I guess. And there's no one size fits all, but suggestions on things that can help with wellbeing. And it's really about making that safe space for our teams to be able to come forward and speak to us. And not feel that they're being chastised or that there's going to be it's removing the stigmatism really, and that's what we work really, really hard at Leon to do.
Excellent, Claire. Thank you very much for that. Anyone got any other comments on that side of things? No, perfect. Okay, we'll move on to the next subject then, which is going to be on the technology side of things. So is this the creator of issues or is it part of the solution? Jo, you get that one.
Hi. So I'm Jo Harley from Purple Cubed. So we work mainly with hospitality businesses for helping them with employee engagement, helping them to create great places to work. And we have some tech problems, so we sort of know all about the tech space, but when it comes to mental health or supporting well-being, I suppose with technology, there's two ways to look at it: on a micro level and on a macro level. So on a macro level, like, technology isn't going anywhere, and we know that people's screen time is massively up and has been during the whole pandemic. And I'd advise anyone that hasn't watched it to have a look at The Social Dilemma on Netflix, because I think the way that we use technology now is so part of our everyday lives and it's not going anywhere. So it's all about being aware of how technology impacts us on a day-to-day basis and how it can have an impact on mental health. And then from a business point of view or a parent point of view or a personal point of view, then it's we're a part of the Centre for Humane Technology, which is all about using technology for good. So again, they'd be a great place to go and look and research and see what you can do as a business to be helping. But tech at work, I think, and echoing what Maria said, really, this is all about culture. Technology can be a massive creator of issues. We all know people where communications have been mistimed, where the wrong WhatsApp message has gone out at the wrong time, and people, can make people feel really uncomfortable and anxious and not feeling like they're being communicated to enough, because technology is the way that we're communicating now. But also it can be a solution that in itself can be completely overwhelming. I think the last time I looked, there were 15,000 mental health apps on the App Store. So for a business, what to provide as a solution, I think, is a real challenge, because everybody's different. Everybody's got different levels of mental health, from from great mental health to really poor mental health. And helping people with their well-being is a responsibility of an employer. And I suppose at Purple Cube, what we would advocate is that you need to ask people. You need to ask people how they're feeling on a really regular basis, but then try and collate that information to bring together a solution for your business that can work for each individual, and then signpost them to the right places. So it's not a one size fits all. It has to happen at the beginning. It has to happen throughout your entire culture. If your leaders and your managers aren't aware of how of the impact of how they're communicating on people, that's going to have an impact. So yeah, I think that's what we would say about technology.
And Jo, I mean, being at Purple Cube, you guys get to step in and out of lots of different kind of like organizations, much as we get to do kind of on the recruitment side of things. And is there anything that you've seen that kind of employers are doing at the moment, like, specifically that you think may create some best practice? I mean, one example that we heard in a webinar a couple of weeks ago, and I wouldn't name the individual, but mentioned that they would shorten their calls, like rather than doing an hour, they do 55 minutes. And then at the end of each call, everybody picks up the phone to kind of like an employee in the business and just asks how they are, does kind of beg the question that if somebody says they're not okay, how you wrap up that call in 5 minutes and get on to your next call. But the fact that they're actually kind of like making the point of kind of asking that question, it's kind of like, you know, a really positive thing. Are there, you know, what else have you kind of seen that companies are doing that you've kind of thought, wow, that's great?
I mean, I think the main thing, and this goes back, is that the businesses that were doing stuff really well before the pandemic continue to do stuff really well as they've gone into it. I think it's about consistent and clear communication, and to make sure that everybody feels like they are supported. You know, I know I've worked with one business where, you know, they're in the HR, you know, and it shouldn't be down to HR, but she was at one point receiving up to 1,000 emails a day, and she was answering every single one of them because she wanted everybody to feel like she was responding to them in real time. Because change, people react to change in different ways. So I'm sure you've all seen the change curve, which is much like the grief, the cycle that people go through with grief. And on the change curve, different people will come to acceptance of stuff at different times. And I think it's really about understanding the individual. So I haven't really got any very specific examples, but just the companies that are doing it well are communicating very well, very clearly, and very consistently, and keeping in touch. You know, that's the main thing.
Excellent. I think I might know who that individual is, Joe, but thank you very much for that. On the technology side of things, anybody else got anything to contribute? No. Oh, Maria.
Hi. Yeah, I think just on something that Joe said about how it shouldn't necessarily be HR's job, and it often does come back to us, and it's interesting why that is, and the role that technology has in communicating. Communication is so important. A lot of it is just communication. It's just talking to people, listening to them. You know, even if we train people up to, you know, how to listen, or mental health champions and first aiders and things like that, we are not mental healthcare professionals, and a lot of it will be signposting. A lot of it will be that communication, just saying, you know, let us know what we can do. Let us know if you're struggling, and we can guide you somewhere. But I do think that. I think often people in HR will take it on, like Joe gave the example of someone answering 1,000 emails themselves, and I've certainly been in a similar position where you think I have to because no one else is going to do it. So it's also, you know, I feel is equipping and empowering our managers and our staff to pick that up. And we all have different degrees of natural empathy, I guess, and natural listening skills. But I think you can teach a lot of it. You can teach a lot of this is how to approach what can be a sensitive conversation. And technology can be really beneficial in that. And I feel like there's so many more places we could go. There's so many apps, there's so many platforms, there's so many communication kind of mechanisms that will make that a lot easier. So I think for my part, I would like to use more of it without the kind of Zoom fatigue that I think we've all picked up over the last few months. Use it in a more beneficial way.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that one thing I read recently was that at the moment, people aren't going to remember specifics. You know, once we come out of this, people are going to remember how they felt and how they see leaders acting and how they see people acting when they are under stressful situations, when things are changing really quickly. So if, you know, everybody will make mistakes. So it's almost own those mistakes, communicate those mistakes, let people know when you're feeling vulnerable as a leader. You know, if you can show people that you're being kind, you're being resilient, and you'll forgive them, then that will go a long way, you know, just as much as any specific, you know, initiative or application around well-being. I think it's wrapped up in the whole culture of a business as to how you treat people.
Yeah, absolutely. Good sentiment, Joe. Thank you very much for that. On the tech side of things, okay, I think we've covered off that subject now. Coming to David, and working from home and mental health issues from a best practice perspective. David, on to you.
Hi, yes, I'm David King, and I'm a talent management specialist for a South African-based retailer called Mr. Price Group. We've got about 1,500 stores, in South Africa and across Africa, and about 20,000 employees. So working from home impacted probably 1,000 people at our head office. Initially, we went straight into a very hard lockdown in the end of March in South Africa, which meant that only essential services at that time were available. So our stores were not open, but after a month, our retailers were allowed to reopen. So it primarily affected most of our head office people in that space, and we very much were not we were very much a face-to-face organization. So learning to Zoom and to use MS Teams was something that I think a lot of organizations literally had to learn overnight, which was a massive learning curve. But I'm impressed to see how quickly we actually all caught on. So trying to assist people from working from home was a challenge, but we did use MS Teams as our platform. And going back to what most of you have said, it really is about keeping connected. It was about checking on people initially, and if you want to boil it down to one word, it's about caring. So it's really, as you said, it's not HR's responsibility. However, I think we have a natural, in the HR field, we have a natural leaning towards empathy and concern towards others. However, it's Lion's responsibility to look after their team, and that's really the relationships that you need to build with your team. So from an HR perspective, it was encouraging Lion to check in with their teams, to keep the connection, to also identify if there were any issues or challenges, because people were dealing with stuff that we all were dealing with, but there were variations depending on whether you had children, whether you were working solely at home, which impacted your obviously your well-being. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you very much, and thanks for joining us from South Africa, David. Much appreciated. Now, guys, anything else on the home working side of things? No. Okay.
Just
Simon.
A quick one, Christian. I think it's interesting because I think working from home historically has sounded to many, like being absolutely amazing and brilliant, and it does have its benefits. No travel, the fridge is close, you spend more time with the children and so on. But for many, I don't think it is maybe as idyllic. Particularly we've spoken to many of our sales team recently that have had to work at home, and the feedback that we've had is that often they've missed their colleagues. They found it difficult to concentrate as well. As we all know, the doorbell goes, the kids come home, the dog barks, and it's all, and actually it's affected their performance as well. In the main, so it's often, and that has also impacted their earnings potentially as well, and they've also found getting support often more difficult than before from their line managers. It's not as easy, they're not stood right there, and the other thing is, I think working conditions, I know I might have a lovely background here, but if you could see the other side of this room, it doesn't look like this. So working conditions aren't always as great as we may like, and I think best practice, is often don't assume that working from home is the best solution for everyone. I think a bit of both can work well. Working a bit at home, if the team can get into the office, and also regularly reviewing the stats in terms of how the teams are performing, but also doing surveys. So we do quite a lot of surveys with the team just to check how they're doing. We have regular contact with them, as I think some of the previous speakers have said, and just making sure that everything we can do works for them. Their workstations, their connectivity, Zoom calls with senior managers as well, just to check in how they're doing. So I think there's lots of pros and cons, but lots we can do to support.
Now, there was quite an interesting part that was kind of like in the comments that you just answered, Simon, just while I've got you, and which was like how Matthew asked, how do you support people, leaders who have been tasked with supporting people in teams with their mental health, especially when it comes to illness and not just low, poor health. It would be great if you could just elaborate a little bit on your answer. And also for the rest of the panel, there was a question that was posed into the Q&A about some of the new initiatives, and if there's anything that you feel senior leaders and line managers should not be doing when it comes to mental health, which is quite interesting, like in terms of what kind of line that we should draw. So guys, if you've got any commentary on that, then maybe kind of like pop it into the Q&A, and then Simon, if you can just give us a little bit about your answer to Matthew's question, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. I think it's interesting one, because I don't think all line managers are terribly confident talking about mental health. I think it's I think they can find it quite difficult. So I think anything that we can do is just build their confidence. And there's lots of great training out there. I think to just build their confidence in what it is, how it affects people, and also particularly how that they don't have to have all the answers. But I think having some kind of professional body that team members can be referred to for additional support is important, because I think if you've got more serious mental health concerns with team members, I think it's critical that you've got that support. And the other bit I put in there was just around having what we have for our senior team, an external mentor for a few of them. So if they don't feel happy or confident talking to their peers or their line manager, which most of them do, but if they don't, at least they've got that external ear to have a bit of help and support from.
Excellent, thanks very much. Anyone else got any comments on that side of things? There's a few now. Dan, come to you first.
Yeah, I just on the working from home part. Sorry, I realised I didn't introduce myself last time. I'm Dan Kelly, Deputy MD of Vacherin, who are a central London workplace catering company. I think one thing we need to remember is everybody is so different, and everybody deals with things in so many different ways, and working from home can impact 3, 4, 5, 6 different people in 6 different ways. And it's what we've seen is, and the Mental Health Foundation actually did some research on this, is that it's actually broken down into age groups as well as per people's likes and dislikes. And their recent findings were those aged between 18 to 24 were actually suffering the most. Whereas I think most people were thinking that the ages between 18 and 24 didn't really care and weren't that bothered by it. And it is the older people, the older generations, that are suffering with it less until you get to a certain point of when people become elderly. In America, there was this amazing stat that came out, and I don't know if anybody else saw it, but the use of mental health helplines went up 891% through their COVID issues and people working from home. And I think that says a lot. People really don't know how to tackle it. I think it was Simon that touched on earlier. It was great to start with. It was the unknown. It was one of those things that you did every now and then, and it's great in small doses. But people being taken away from other people is not great, not for humankind. People are put into isolation when they're reprimanded. No one ever says, "Oh, you've done really well today. Go and sit on your own in the corner." We are used to using that as a way to reprimand people or to get people to realise that things aren't right. Or imprisonment, etc., etc. That it's used as a technique to make people suffer in that respect and make them realise that they've done something that isn't quite right. So to sit there and think that working from home, isolated on your own, is the way forward, I think we have to acknowledge that can't be the way. There has to be touch points, and we have to manage those touch points and do everything that we can to promote that. I feel that, as I touched on earlier, it's all right to say we have to do it now. It has to be part of the process. It touches on with the tech. I think most companies really should be saying no tech. If you're working from home, you shut everything down at 7 o'clock, for example, or 6 o'clock, because otherwise you're never away from it. And it's very easy for the individual to push themselves into a position where they're very uncomfortable and they're struggling. And they don't know then how to respond. I still, at this point, still think it's the job of the employers to help the employees to make those decisions, because in a time like this, where everyone's trying to prove their worth because they want to retain their job, they're all pushing themselves beyond their limits to work longer and work harder, when actually it's not good for them, and isolating themselves even more so. They're isolating themselves away from their colleagues. They're also isolating themselves away from their friends and their family. Obviously they have to at the moment, but in times where they're having to work longer hours and harder, they're making it worse upon themselves.
Very good sentiment. Thank you very much for that, Dan. Coming back to you, Joe.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I think that there's a lot to do with trust in this, in that actually, you know, where before we all used to get on a train or a bus or whatever and go to a workplace and stay there and then come home and people knew where you were and what you were doing and all the rest of it. I think that now it's about leaders and businesses saying, do you know what? Get your work done, do it in the time that suits you. If you want to log on later and log off later, that's fine. If you want to take a big break in the middle of the day because that's what suits you, that's fine. Go and pick your kids up from school. You know, have some advantages, have some ways of fitting this into your life and creating real work-life balance. And so I think a lot of organisations have been forced to trust that people, and proven that people will still do their job if they're working at home. I know there was a lot of fear. My other half works in planning, and you know, which is an industry that I'm not familiar with at all. And they were all so scared that people just wouldn't work and wouldn't be productive. But people want to work, people want to do it, and I think it's about giving people the space to do stuff when they feel good. If you don't feel great one morning and you don't want to put on your emails for a couple of hours, don't. Let people know what you're doing and just trust that people will do their jobs.
Yeah, good sentiment as well. Thank you very much for that, Joe. Maria.
Yeah. Someone asked in the Q&A what senior management shouldn't do, and I think both Joe and Dan just kind of touched on it. It's I don't think they should treat people one size fits all. And my experience of working from home during the first lockdown was, I don't mind sharing, very difficult. So I've got a 6-7-year-old, he's 7 now, and he wasn't at school obviously in the first lockdown, so I was there trying to I think I started my head of HR job on the 1st of March, and then we went into lockdown 3 weeks later. So I was learning about my new job, the company, a pandemic, how to navigate furlough, and I had a 7-year-old sitting there the whole time going, mummy, mummy, mummy. And I think that feeling of guilt was so huge, and that had a massive impact on my mental health. And I would hear people saying, oh, you're so lucky that you get to work from home, and you're so lucky that you can spend time with your son. And I was sort of there smiling, trying not to resent people who were on furlough and trying not to resent people who didn't have small children. And I found it very, very difficult, and I really struggled to cope. And it was when my boss, who's one of the directors, I don't mind saying, broke down on a Teams call, just going, I can't do this anymore. And I think he said, but you don't have to do it all. You don't have to. That the whole responsibility is not on you. So let go of some of it. And it sounds so simple, but it was a senior manager saying that to me, saying it's not all your responsibility. You can't do 2 things at once. You can't parent a young child and be a head of a department at the same time. And I think in this lockdown, thankfully the schools are open. Long may that continue. But also I was dragged kicking and screaming into lockdown. But in the second round, I feel like it's almost my opportunity to get it right, to say, these are my boundaries. This is when I log off. This is how I'm going to protect my mental health, so I don't break down on Teams calls, so I am a good mother, and it's that whole picture. So I've certainly learned that, and touching on resilience, again, that somebody mentioned earlier, resilience is a huge part of managing your own mental health. And I think when senior managers can get that message out, that is incredibly useful to somebody who is struggling during a crisis like this. It is a crisis. We're all going through it together. We're all affected in different ways. But that's what really helped me, and I really valued that. I think that's very important.
Thanks, Maria. Thank you very much for that. Duncan, I'm going to come to you on advice for employers in supporting their employees.
Yeah, so I'm Duncan Short, Director of Resources at Vivid. Vivid is a social housing company. We've got about 32,000 homes in and around Hampshire, and about 70,000 people live in them, about 850 employees. So that's, I guess, context for us. I think what I would say is kind of probably 3 broad bits of advice. Firstly, kind of sounds obvious, don't ignore the issue. There's a huge amount, or there has historically been a huge amount of stigma attached to mental health. People don't like to talk about it. It's something we slightly want to brush under the carpet. Fortunately, I think society is changing, and more forward-looking organisations are also kind of grabbing the handle and sort of dealing with it. So I think it's important that organisations embrace the issue and trying to help and resolve things. I think it's also important to kind of recognise what they can do and what they can't do. So within that, it's about understanding the limits of what you can do and then being able to point people in the direction of others who can provide more support. So I think it's, for me, first point is really important that organisations kind of get involved with the subject. And I think particularly senior people in the organisation. I mean, we started our journey about 3 years ago in Vivid, and we were fortunate. We had a senior, sort of like a roofer, ex-roofer, so very, very blokey, very, very male, and he wrote a blog about some mental health issues he was having. Huge impact. I mean, absolutely started to get people to say, God, if he can talk about it, we can talk about it as well. So it was really important that. I think the other thing is about what you do needs to resonate with your culture. So, we were trying to create a culture which is very much adult to adult, about trusting people. So as some of the other panelists have said, it's about not presenteeism, about trusting people to do their job in the way they wanted. We'd started down the route of flexible working. So what we wanted to do around mental health was really supporting that. So find tools and avenues and support mechanisms that essentially helped people support themselves. We felt that was the right way to do it, and that would, I guess, complement what we were doing elsewhere around our cultural development. So I think you need to make sure that what you do aligns with other activities you have. And I guess lastly, and it's been said by others, it's not one cat fits all, it's multi-channel. So we have, a range of employees, age groups, skill sets, genders, etc. And I think everyone deals with, and whilst you can sort of generically describe, young people might like a particular thing, women different to men, etc., etc. Roofers might be a case in point. But I think it's recognising that you need to provide different channels for people to provide support to them. So, we had stuff which was around stigma busters. So they were people who would talk about it. We had workshops, we had sessions in our diners where people could just come and have a chat. But we recognised that doesn't suit everyone. We used an app called 87%, downloaded to every company phone. So that was something people could do that way. We had an employee assistance program which we could target people at, point people at. So it was really about choosing all the different avenues so that people felt whatever my particular need and the way I want to address it, there's something here that will help me. So I think those would be, I guess, the three main bits I would talk about. So, one, the organisation has to, quote unquote, positively engage with the issue. Need to make sure that what you do links to the rest of your culture and the way you're trying to create the culture in the organisation. And lastly, it's not a one cat fits all. It is multi-dimensional, really. It's multi-channel. Those have been my key points. And I did remember to take myself off mute.
I would have told you long before now, Duncan. Don't worry.
So you might have just been laughing at me, watching me talk,
Anyone got any other comments on that side of things? No, fine. There was a point that I just wanted to bring up that David wanted to discuss, which was about psychological safety and employee assistance programs. David, could you just give us a little bit about that, please?
I think we've found that an employee assistance program has been so beneficial, and it's something that any large organization or small organization should definitely look at, because you were talking earlier about we're not all experts in every area, and knowing that there's a number you can call, and a lot of employee assistance programs is not just a telephone call, you can also have face-to-face sessions, which is a very, very powerful tool that people can engage with. And then from a psychological safety perspective, we've done a lot of work with our leaders in understanding that term, because as you've said too, the stigma around mental wellness is there. So people are not going to share unless they feel safe to share. So then that's has to be inculcated into your culture. Otherwise, people will not open up and not share. And that's also led us to doing examples of letting leaders share their stories. Once again, similar to Duncan's example, people who can tell you something that they've been through, and that I as an individual can relate to. And that's been also very powerful, because it's almost like permission to talk about stuff that you didn't talk about previously. And I think probably, I think we're probably very similar to the English approach, that you don't talk about these things. You sort of, it's a stiff upper lip, sweep things under the carpet. Whereas I think the Americans generally talk a lot about emotions and feelings and psychological issues, which is, I think, the right approach. So it really is about driving that awareness all the time and making people feel comfortable.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that extra bit, David. Anyone else got any commentary on the employee programs at all? Nope, all good. Perfect. So coming on to the next question, which was for Sean. So the link between healthy eating, exercise, and mental health. Sean. You're on mute. You're still on mute.
Oh.
There you are.
Hear me?
You're in.
Excellent. So my name is Shane. I'm the founder of a wellness company called Jasperwellbeing, which I started 2 years ago when I was a chef, working with Dan Kelly and under the excellent guidance of Joe. My focuses are mindfulness and resilience training, working with companies and individuals. So I have spent 22 years within hospitality. Now, yes, food and mental health, it's something that we need to talk about more, actually, and it's something that I worked with Dan Kelly on actually for 6 years. And what we eat obviously plays a massive part in our mental health, but we often don't talk about it as energy management. So the important thing we all have in common is energy management and our day-to-day energy management, which has an effect on our long-term mental health. So it's about food and mood. So what we eat has a massive effect on us mentally, physically, emotionally. Energy basically feeds our motivation, our positivity, and it's about regulating our blood sugars. Many of us go through the day, especially probably working at home, where we're on this roller coaster up and down of energy. And when we feel anxious or stressed, we're generally reaching for rubbish, or just loads of kind of rubbish snacks and whatever, or sometimes even missing food. So when we're reaching for them snacks, the energy output is very small. So we tend to dip in and out. So you can imagine the effect that has on the mind. And sometimes when we do have them dips, we can stay in them dips for a long time if we're not looking after it. So sustainable energy from foods that are rich in kind of nutrients, vitamins, minerals, spread out over the day is really important. So yeah, it's about renewable energy, which in scientific terms is energy transfer molecules, or ATPs. So this is key for our whole body function, our gut, our heart, our liver, and there's a massive correlation between our gut health and our mind. So yeah, very important. Obviously, we know physical activity helps us. It helps increase our endorphins, our hormones, neurotransmitters, the good ones, the happy ones, dopamine, serotonin. So it's really important. And I think it's important to talk about it more in depth, like kind of I just did, rather than saying, physical activity is going to help. Because a lot of people go, all right, yeah. But if you understand it a little bit better and a little bit more in depth, it can give you that motivation to go, actually, yeah, you're right, and kind of put a light bulb moment in your brain. And it's very important, food and exercise, for our mental well-being. And I would say to anyone who's struggling to get up and exercise, it's not just about, you don't have to go and lift loads of weights, which sound daunting. It's even just walking, and doing the smallest things can get us out there. But a lot of us find it difficult to get in a position of doing exercise. But what I would say is, even if you don't kind of fancy doing it, just push yourself to try and do it, because once you do it, you'll want to do it. And that's really important. So have an outside-in approach rather than an inside-out approach where we wait to feel good until we eat well or until we do exercise. We wait to feel like we want to, and often that doesn't come. So it's important to kind of outside-in approach and just find the motivation to do it.
Very good sentiments. Thanks very much. And the kind of link between the food and mental health side of things. I mean, Dan, I can imagine you've put some commentary on this, have you?
What makes you say that? Yeah, as Shane touched on earlier, we worked in great detail, and it was great to have two minds that thought very similarly over the years on this topic. I think one of the things that we have to remember as well with this case of lockdown and people working from home, there's something that there's a link to food that creates a massive issue for those home workers. And that is, if you're in the office, everything's done for you, everything's taken care of for you. And the decision making, as Shane was touching on, is made a lot easier, because this is what we do as a job, as a business at Vacherin. We manage this for people so that they can just walk into the cafe areas and the restaurants, and we even give them the information that Shane was talking about. This is what you should eat at this time of day to make sure that you are at your optimum and you stay at your optimum for the rest of the day. People at home if they don't have that knowledge or information, what they tend to do is, I haven't got time because I need to get back onto another Zoom call, so I'll just grab something quickly out of the cupboard. And they have to understand that anything that is quick like that generally isn't good, and it is about self-discipline in doing that. I think we also need to remember, Jamie Oliver, I think, he's done some great stuff over the years, and more particularly the thing about school dinners and school lunches. His work with professionals and scientists based around ADHD was phenomenal, and he proved in one school that if they got fresh food cooked well, that actually all of their attention spans changed completely. And I believe it was something around the 88% mark, increased dramatically over the period of a term, which you really have to focus on and realize that there is a big part to play for nutrition and mental health. I could go on for hours probably on it, but I think it's something that everyone really does need to take into account.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Dan. Sorry to call you out on it, but there you go. Anyone else got any commentary on that side of things?
Just very quickly, I think really great from both of you there. Shane, as I thought your piece on diet was absolutely spot on. I think it's sort of incumbent on us, with our teams to help. So how do we educate that stuff really well, and also what platforms could we use for it, because it's obviously diet, but it's also, I think sleep is mega important in terms of mental health and exercise. So I guess educating, raising awareness, how we do that, how we train our teams, and the expertise that we use in doing that is critical.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for that. I think that's everything on that topic. So I'm now just going to move on to Dan, back to Dan on the exec and senior level. Should we be taking a different approach? I mean, that was a brilliant example that Maria had earlier on that I really enjoyed, but what approach should we be taking at that level?
Yeah, I think my general answer to this is yes and no. As Maria touched on earlier, and I think a few others have said today, you can't it's not one size fits all across the board, and that's not just for certain individuals, it's absolutely across the board at all different levels. Some people deal with stress and pressure a lot better than others, and it doesn't matter at what level you sit at. I think a lot through the years, the misconception is if you're at a certain level, you're able to deal with stress and pressure and you don't have any mental health issues. It's completely wrong. I've worked with some brilliant people at very senior levels, business leaders that have their own problems that they've tried to deal with over the years and actually didn't get anywhere until they accepted the fact, I've got a problem, I need someone to help me to help myself. And I think there are so many aspects that come into play when you're talking at senior level. First of all, there is this belief that there should be a facade. You shouldn't open up, and you shouldn't tell anyone that you're struggling, because everyone will look down on you. And actually, I'm pretty sure it was Maria that touched on earlier that if you do open up, it creates a better relationship with your team members. That actually you're not indestructible. You are a human being. Humans, work with humans far better than they do robots or machines or anything like that. So actually telling people it's okay to open up and have that kind of relationship is pivotal, regardless of the level that you're at. I think there's another point that we need to remember as well, is that at the exec and senior level, you're focusing not only on your own well-being, you're focusing on everybody else's well-being. And we have to remember the stress and the pressure that puts on the individual, because you are thinking about the person to the left, to the right, up, down, everywhere, the entire business, as well as the approach of the business. And that goes on to another part, which is the ethos. If you make a change within the business, everyone has to be bought into it. And this goes back to working from home or anything like that. Everyone has to understand and acknowledge where they're going and where the business is trying to go towards, because a sudden change can really set somebody off in a different route and actually really upset their belief in what they're doing and what they're trying to achieve. I think we spoke a lot about the employee assistance program. There are, there are programs there for different levels as well. And there's a reason for that, because people need different attention dependent on the level that you're at. And we've got a couple that we work with. And I think the biggest thing out of this, I go round and round in circles on it, but the biggest thing is something that we touched on earlier. It's okay not to be okay. It doesn't matter what level you're at. It doesn't matter what position you hold. It doesn't matter how many staff you are managing. And we have a touch point every month, where all of the senior people within our business, we ask each other if we're okay. What's going on? What's going on in your world? If we haven't come together, we make a point of saying, what's going on? Is there anything I can help you with? And Shane will agree with this. Over the years, I've always said to him, it's all right for him to come to me and say, is there anything I can do for you to help you? It's not a one-way street. And I think that's a big part that managers and executives get wrong themselves. They don't want their staff coming to them, or their team members, or any parts of their team saying, can I take something from you? Because they feel like they're giving something up, and they are worried or concerned that they're not worth the job that they're holding, or so on and so forth, and they'll be seen that they can't do it. And the training and the approach is different, but it also, you have to be, there's so much that is also the same, I guess, is the answer to that from my point of view.
Great, thank you very much for that, Dan. Duncan, did you have some commentary there?
Yeah, and just to kind of reinforce that point, I think absolutely for senior managers, the issue is no different really at one level. They'll suffer or not depending on their character, I guess, and what's going on around them. And I was just going to use an illustration. Hopefully, no one knows my boss, who's chief executive business, but he's one of these people who likes to wander down and have a chat to people to get a sense of how things are happening in the organisation, and he triangulates things. It's all about informal conversations. So when he's stuck at home, impossible to do. And you kind of really noticed how he began to slightly disengage, and we had to sort of say to him, like, you kind of, how are things going? And I think he got to the stage where he kind of recognized, and he used to say, rather than say I'm struggling, he'd say, I don't like all this working from home stuff. I don't really like it. And that was his way, I guess, of saying that actually it's not great. And everyone had to kind of work around how it was going to be. So, but it absolutely does impact all levels of the organization. And I think, for someone who's very senior, sometimes it is very difficult to accept there's a problem, because you're so used to coping, to leading, to doing all that stuff. But it was very powerful when he started to say, yeah, I don't like this home working, because that was his way, I guess, of saying, actually, I'm beginning to struggle a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got to say, there was one thing that we did at Core which we found to be really interesting. Arno might make a face at this or not, I'm not quite sure. But there's a Swedish thing called fika that you do, which basically I think it translates to bit of cake. And it basically means it kind of like, you know, Haley organised it kind of once every 2 or 3 weeks. And we basically on a Thursday morning all sit around with, I mean, a bit of cake, coffee, whatever it is, but without an agenda on Zoom, and everybody just has a chat about something, or just shares a story or says something and all of that kind of stuff. And it's actually kind of like, it's when you talk about the things that you remember, I tend to remember that as opposed to remember kind of like the really functional kind of meetings that you end up doing. But have a Google of that if it's something that you're interested in, definitely. Great. Now we are going to move around the group for kind of some final thoughts. I thought that we might have a panelist. I'm just going to see if she's messaged back. Oh, sorry, one of the attendees who wanted to make actually get in on camera, but she hasn't messaged back, unfortunately, but to give her point of view as well, but I think she's gone. So I'm just going to move around to kind of like your top tip on the mental health and maintaining good mental health. And we'll start off with Claire.
Yeah, so I think it's about listening. I think that's the key thing. And I think that although people might have dealt with their own mental health issues, or people are coming to you and you might have dealt with your own mental health issues, people, it's not one size fits all. And so I think it's very much about listening and not coming in with solutions for that person, but to coach people to get to where they need to be. I think that's the top tip, is just communication and listening.
Excellent, Claire. Thank you very much for being with us. Much appreciated. Maria, on to you.
Hiya. My top tip is actually, we'll answer one of the Q&As that's open there, because someone's asking about how we can get information about diet and exercise across without increasing stigma associated with eating disorders and body image. So it would be remiss of me working in a fitness industry not to comment on that, but also from a personal level, I think I work out almost every day, and for me it's not about a look or a weight or a size, and I have to say that I'm lucky that I don't have a negative experience with eating or diet or anything like that, but I think it's the language that we use around those things. You know, I do it to be stronger, to feel healthier, to be a better mother, to be a better friend, a better colleague. It mentally puts me in a good space, and I think it's oh sorry, my lights are being funny in here. It's the language that we use around these tools to help us, whether it's fitness or diet or anything else. And I say diet as in what you take into your body, not how small you can make yourself. It's the language that we use and why we do things. We're not promoting fitness in our company as a way to be a size 0. It's a way to be strong, healthy members of the community, supporting the community. And I think that should be replicated in all circles of life.
Good sentiment. Thank you very much for that, Maria. Much appreciated. Duncan, coming on to you next.
Gosh, a single tip. I suppose
you can have a few if you like, Duncan.
No, you're right. You're right. I suppose for me, it kind of sounds really basic, but it is about just those open questions, asking how people are. I think that just enables the conversation to start, I think, in a non-judgmental way. So if they say, I'm struggling a bit, don't sort of turn the conversation off. Oh, well, yeah, ring the EAP and wander off. You just engage with people and have a conversation. I think if you can do that, it'll make things so much better for many people.
Excellent, Duncan. That's great. Thank you very much for being with us. David, on to you.
My tip is vulnerability. I think I'm sure most of you have heard of Brené Brown, but if you haven't, go and Google her. Very powerful concept for us all to understand. And I think if we can learn to be vulnerable, others will feel open to be vulnerable. So, and that reduces the stigma around, I think, mental health.
That's a very interesting one. Thank you very much for that, David. Much appreciated, and thanks for joining us. Dan, on to you next.
I've got two, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
One is proactive. I touched on it earlier, and reaction is great, but the issue's already happened and it's already there. Try as much as you possibly can to be proactive in the situation and the scenario, by a lot of the things that people have said here, but do as much as you can to be proactive about it and don't allow it to get to a point where you have to react. The other thing for me is, for the individual, is balance. Everything is great, but an excess of anything is pretty bad and will impact you somewhere down the line. So always look for that balance in life, in diet, in keeping fit. You know, even too much of that might not be so great. So in everything that you try and everything that you do, just try and keep that balance. That was it.
Excellent, Dan. Thank you very much for that. Shane, back to you. Oh, you're on mute. There you go.
Hello. So for the individuals, I'd say if you are working from home, make sure that you treat it like a work day, or even better than a work day. Plan your day out. Make sure you have breaks at least every 90 minutes. Use the outdoors. It's brilliant. It's nourishing, and it's great for our mental health. Go outside, breathe some air. Make sure, again, our energy management, which I touched on. Get good sleep. And I'm throwing loads out here, but sleep deprivation is known as a form of torture by Amnesty International. So there's a little fact for you. I've been there and done that in this chef life, but yeah. So sleep, boundaries, exercise, and yeah, that's about it.
Excellent, brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Joe, on to you.
So mine is a bit of a quote actually, which really resonated with me, which is, some of the balls that you're juggling are glass and some of the balls that you're juggling are plastic. And it's okay to drop a family ball to catch a work ball sometimes, and vice versa, but never act like all your balls are made of glass.
That's a really good quote, Joe. Thanks for that. Was that Jane Sunley special?
No, that's it's actually, I read it in Harvard Business Review, but it's actually the author Nora Roberts, and it's just one that's just really stuck with me because it just really seems to make sense. I often act like everything is of equal importance, and sometimes it's okay to remember that sometimes it doesn't matter if your kids, you know, have pizza for tea or whatever. Sometimes it doesn't matter if you don't attend the call that you said you're going to attend, you know, so just manage yourself.
Kids have pizza for tea every night, Joe, but that's great. Thanks for that. And
pretend I'm a mother.
And lastly, coming back to you, Simon.
Yeah, thanks. I'm going to follow that with a great quote. Unfortunately, Joe, I think mine was just. I think the key thing is just talking about mental health. Make it a usual part of how you operate, how you communicate, and make sure it's a part of your culture and the way that you do things in your business. And also particularly talking about and coming back to Shane's point, the benefits associated. You know, how do you get to have great mental health and the benefits associated with it? Because I think that'll help certainly, raise people's awareness. So that's me. Thanks, Krishnan.
Excellent. Thanks for being with us, Simon. Much appreciated. Just if you're watching this as a recording afterwards, you won't have access to the Q&A. So I just wanted to point out from David, Brene Brown is Brene Brown, and there's a TED talk that she did, and then the book that Maria mentioned earlier on is thelostconnections.com. If you're watching this as a recording later on, you won't have access to the Q&A. So just so you've got those links there as well. Well, I thought that was a really insightful panel, guys. Thank you very much, and quite upbeat as well, which I think is kind of quite important as well to give people kind of like a bit of positivity. So I want to thank you all very much for taking part. I thought that was a great session. At Core, we're obviously kind of continuing our webinar series, as I mentioned before, up until the end of the year. And today we have our marketing webinar starting at 12:30. We've got a 2 p.m. delivery and meal service. Then we're going to be looking at Christmas trends in the high street. What can we expect this year? It was not easy to find panelists for that one, but there's some people who are going to stick their necks out and give us their thoughts. We've got candidate support webinar at 5 o'clock today, which is looking at your social media and how to create your personal brand, which will be quite interesting for anyone who's job seeking at the moment. And then we're finishing the day with a UK-US entrepreneurs webinar. which is individuals who have started businesses during the pandemic and have been expanding them, which I think will be quite interesting. Next week, we're going to be looking at remote site, reskilling, pub and late night sector. We've got a company feature on Brewdog, co-working, and then we're finishing the day with UK and USA property and looking at trends for 2021. So if you want to join us for any of those, then all the links are on our social media or will be emailed out later on. So just leaves me to say thank you very much to Arno. There he is, in a very quiet core office. Thank you very much for managing the IT, and thank you very much to the panel, and we'll hopefully see you soon on the next webinars. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thank you.